Hey everyone, I'm Lisa Jordan, and welcome to MenoPositive.
I got a good feeling.
Where we take a refreshingly positive approach to navigating menopause. If you're looking for practical tips, expert advice, and honest conversations, think of this as your personal pick and mix for how to optimize your body. Although we can't prevent menopause, we can redefine it. And that journey starts now. The other day, someone reminded me that COVID was 5 years ago. Can you believe that? Prior to lockdown, I traveled a lot for work. I was on and off airplanes probably every 2 weeks. I didn't resent it. I got to work with wonderful people, travel to beautiful places, and do extraordinary things. Even when I wasn't working, I love traveling with my family. There's nothing like the excitement of touching down in a city or a new country. I inhale everything like the architecture, the local customs, music, food. I mean, the food. My husband is adept at finding like the best donut, the best ice cream, the best place to eat. We always eat local and steer away from the chains that we're all used to, except this one time in Japan. Okay, so you can't visit Tokyo without a visit to their famous fish market in the early hours of the morning. We had a chefy friend recommend this small sushi restaurant inside the market that was a must. We rocked up to this tiny place full of locals. Check. Sat at the counter and awaited our food. Have you ever had raw fish and tobacco tea at 6 a.m. in the morning? I mean, if that's not part of your culture, that is hard for anyone to swallow. What I'm trying to get at, though, is we were open to it. You know, it's interesting, I think, how we can be so open to other cultures, how they eat, work, live, while at the same time be dismissive of the tools and modalities they have to heal themselves and treat illness. I don't know. Is it because they don't have those big peer-reviewed studies that we have in Western medicine? I mean, but these things are centuries old. I mean, if they didn't work, I'm not sure they'd stick around this long. Or maybe in the Western world, we've prioritized quick fixes instead of like long-term balance and prevention. Or maybe we just don't know enough or have a recommendation from somebody we trust. Well, all that is changing. You know, as the world opens up, people are opening up to non-medical interventions or at least maybe a combination of East meets West. And that's why today we have the one and only Dr. Taz. She is a double board certified integrative medicine physician and a pioneer in bringing different medicine systems together to treat the whole person. I mean, she was using the word holistic before it was cool to say holistic. In her 20s, she faced some personal health challenges. After being dismissed by many doctors, Dr. Taz turned to nutrition, homeopathy, and Eastern medical wisdom for answers. What she found was a Pandora's box of information that wasn't taught in medical school. She now shares that knowledge through her clinic, CentreSpring MD, in Atlanta, LA, and New York City. And if you don't live there, no fear, she also has a global telehealth platform. Her book, The Hormone Shift, is, without exaggeration, the book I recommend to all of my friends. And if you don't believe me, then maybe you'll listen to Book Riot. I think they named it the best menopause book. Amazon has it on their #1 bestsellers ranking list. She's a regular contributor on The Today Show. She's featured on Good Morning America, CNN, The Huffington Post, The Drew Barrymore Show. And now she's here with you and me. Dr. Taz, welcome to MenoPositive.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that warm introduction. Thrilled to be here.
This is a really amazing moment for me because when this podcast was just an idea in my head, you were my dream guest. And I have worn a t-shirt just to mark that.
Oh my gosh. Aw, thank you.
I first heard your voice. I was listening to a Goop podcast. You were being interviewed by Gwyneth Paltrow. And then, fast forward to your book, The Hormone Shift. And I was like, oh my God, I have found somebody who believes in what I believe in, this idea of east-west approaches. You have been so ahead of the curve on merging these different medicines. 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been able to say holistic on national television. They may have thought you were like
True.
woo-woo.
So true. Yes.
So tell me, what has that journey been like for you?
I am walking into it. I've practiced this type of medicine for 15 years. I've been studying it for probably over 20. I probably was influenced by it without knowing it just in my home, for so long. I'm just in a place of gratitude. I don't know how else to say that. I think I was having a conversation with my husband this morning. It's just, you've got to understand that everything I've done has been accidental up until a point. And I never thought I was a adrenaline junkie doctor. Like I was an ER doctor. I intended to be an ICU doctor. Like I like procedures. I like science. I like all that stuff, right? I like sinking my teeth into that stuff. So to go off field and do this was a huge risk, but it was really motivated by my own personal, story, which I've written about so many times, but also at a personal risk because, I remember my best friend in medical school being like, why would you do this? Like, you're really going to set yourself up for a lot of, criticism. And I was the neighborhood quack. I was then the local quack. I was then the witch doctor. I think a lot of people called me that for a while. And I just kept doing what I was doing. But to kind of land now today in 2025 and see how everybody wants this. This is an accepted term. This is becoming a part of our vernacular, right? I think it's really, really gratifying. So I think I'm just in a place of gratitude and being like, wow, like it was not all for nothing. Like something actually is developing and happening. And, while medicine is still not where I want it, we're way ahead of where we were 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Now, before we jump into the different medicines,
Yeah,
I want to lay some foundations for our listeners. In your book, you explain how women experience hormone shifts throughout their life, and you've
right.
identified the 5 hormone shifts in the book. But I want to start specifically because you start with puberty. And if you're the mom of teenagers, then lean in
Yeah.
because I think it's really interesting. You describe why it's important to check hormones at 13 just as much as it is to check them at 30 or 40.
Definitely. So, I mean, one of the big concepts of Eastern medicine, right, is that health is dynamic, it's fluid, it's a journey, it's not just one lab number, it's not just one marker. And I feel like we do a tremendous disservice, to all of us when we're not thinking just about the field of pediatrics and adolescent medicine in a way that's more holistic and comprehensive. And one of the things we've seen with our adolescents is this escalating mental health crisis, this sort of issue with earlier puberty, all kinds of things that we're seeing in there, but we're still not asking the hard questions of why is this happening? What are all the different factors at play? One of the factors at play is a changing hormone landscape. And I think the earlier we identify that for our young people, the sooner we're setting them up for success when it comes to their health in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. I was looking at a study recently. It's actually, my daughter and I joke around a lot. We're a PCOS family. Everybody's got it. She's got it too. But I had stumbled upon a research study. I'm blanking on the journal at the moment, but I was talking specifically about the rise in PCOS over the last 20 to 30 years. And even somebody like me that's a clinician, I was like, why am I seeing this? Am I just looking for this? Or is this really truly happening at an escalating rate? And the truth is that the hormone landscape is changing. And it's changing because it's talking about between the environmental load, between mothers today being more stressed than they've been, in many different generations, that the fetus or the embryo is getting exposed to higher and higher levels of cortisol and testosterone and skewing to a more androgenic profile. So then by the time you hit puberty, and 15, 16, 17, going into your early 20s, you're already in this high androgen state of PCOS, which is then presenting in different ways. It's presenting as, anxiety and depression and binge eating disorder and anorexia and so much more, not just painful periods or abdominal issues or things like that. So hormones are a superpower when they're working right and impact every other aspect of our health. And that's true for our adolescents too. So why are we skipping it when it comes to them? And instead, we're doing a lot of band-aiding of here's the birth control, here's this, here's that, here's a medication, and they're walking into, their early 20s and then their 30s, like very, blind, honestly, in terms of understanding what's going on with their body.
And in your book, for those who are interested in exploring that further, you do explain some of the tests that you could have for your teenage daughter.
Definitely. And it doesn't have to be, we don't have to make things hard and complicated. Not everyone has to do a big Dutch test or, $1,000 test. There are very simple lab values that tell you very quickly what's going on.
Now, the other hormone shifts, I want to jump straight to Superwoman and
Yeah.
Commander, but you do have the Hustler, which is basically in your 20s. There's the Superstar, which is basically your 30s. And if we jump ahead now to probably most of our listeners, like the Superwomen and maybe the Commanders, because this is
Yeah.
traditionally when we see this dramatic shift and where perimenopause and menopause come in. Can you just give us a highlight of those two the Superwoman and the Commander, because I think some of our listeners might find themselves in it.
Definitely. So the Superwoman and the Commanders are that classic sort of perimenopause going into menopause and then kind of post-menopause phases of our life. And these are the fourth and fifth shifts that I talk about in the hormone shift. The first, of course, like you said, being our adolescents, then women in their 20s, then their 30s. And one of the biggest issues that we see as women walk into perimenopause and then into menopause is that they're experiencing first crazy hormones, is probably the best way to describe them, where, first their progesterone levels drop, and for a period of time, estrogen is just fluctuating. It's low, it's high, it's all over the place. And in turn, that pattern is then influencing what blood sugar does, what cortisol does, what your thyroid does, what testosterone does, what all the other hormones do around it. And then from that shift, they then move further as they get further into perimenopause. They then move into the depletion of estrogen and the further depletion of progesterone, which again influences everything from your gut health, your liver health, your metabolic health, and so much more. So women are experiencing these shifts at maybe a more accelerated or faster rate as they move into these fourth and fifth shifts. And again, just like we talked about with the adolescents, it's impacting every aspect of their health, their mental health, their cognitive health. This is where women are like, oh my gosh, I can't remember anything. I used to be able to run, a team or have big meetings, and now I can't remember what I ate for dinner, to their relationships, right? Well, all of a sudden they're like, I really hate my husband, or I really hate this person. And before you had all this tolerance for it, so it's very tied into how we feel. It's tied into how we think. It's tied into how we look. This is where we start to see changes in our hair and our skin, our nails, our weight, all these markers that we as women use for, gauging what beauty is and all that other stuff. And all of this shifting and changing without the right dialogue and sort of planning around it and problem solving around it really drives women to a place where they begin to retreat and they start to feel less than. So it's now like, I'm not going to go to this event because I don't feel good. I had a high school friend just tell me this the other day, like I'm not going to the reunions because I've gained so much weight, And so you really start to retreat, and the world, instead of becoming a place of joy and fulfillment and things to look forward to, becomes a lot of things you start to fear and become afraid of. And so that changes where you are vibrationally and emotionally. And it all started with the hormone shift, right? So it's like, if we can help women understand what's happening, if we can help them identify it, and then if we can build a holistic toolbox around that, we can land in a very different space to where these fourth and fifth shifts are actually some of the most empowering times of our life. I was talking to a young woman who works for me just the other day in her 30s, and she was peppering me with a lot of questions. She'd been through some trauma and stuff like that. And I'm like, I have never felt as good as I feel now. I feel free. I feel happy. I feel joyful, and I feel without worry. And I think it's because I've been able to do the work that's needed to do in the context of chemistry that works for me. And I think that's what I want for everybody.
And this is, this is that new normal. This is when this is not your mother's menopause. I mean,
Right.
There are so many women out there living vibrant, exciting lives past midlife, writing books or, starting new jobs or starting new businesses or starting new podcasts. It's all happening. There are so many women out there that can demonstrate that. And that's what we want to show here. And that's, I think, what you're trying to achieve in your book with some of the tools that you can make available to people.
Definitely.
So because women experience menopause in so many different ways, can you give us, is it possible to give us a 101 on, how Western medicine, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, approach or view the menopause transition?
Definitely.
Go.
So, but again, it's very individualized. So I'm going to have to try to gate coach it in that language. So Western medicine's easy. Menopause is a decline of hormones. It's where, women enter a period of sort of accelerated aging is probably the way Western medicine sees it. And we see the influence of that aging on our brain, kind of as we mentioned, our brains, our bones, our mental health, and so much more. Western medicine solves or tries to solve the menopause issue. First, it was no hormones for anybody. Now it's all hormones for everybody. Truth is probably in the middle, by the way, but they try to solve it with hormone replacement therapy. So the conversation begins with hormones. The conversation ends with hormones. It's a one solution, a linear, very linear approach, right? Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine are very different. They, first of all, view people individually. So in Ayurveda, the transition into menopause can go in a couple of different ways. It can go from being, regardless of what type you started with, remember they do doshas, so they're typing you individually, but the transition can be going into a more vata state, vata being where you're drier, there's more wind energy, you have a higher need for things like protein and fat and grounding exercises, you're prone to anxiety and depression. Or it can be a transition into a more kapha state where the body is simply slowing down overall. So you're holding on to weight, you're having a lot of issues with blood sugar and movement and things like that. And for some, it's a combination of the two. So they would try to type your menopause is essentially what I'm trying to say. And so they would say, is this a vata menopause? Is this a kapha menopause? Is it a vata kapha menopause? And then build around that the right diet plan for you, the right herbal and supplement plan for you, the right movement plan for you. Community would be a part of that plan as well. And then decide what to do. Of course, they didn't have hormone replacement therapy the way we have it today, but then kind of that hormone conversation would enter the picture later, not as a first step, right? Chinese medicine is very similar, but sometimes I think they may have even been more onto it without understanding it. Now they're diagnosing any shift, whether it's menopause or perimenopause, as a meridian-based issue. So if you are a liver person and having a liver meridian form of menopause, there's a lot of issues with toxicity and detoxing and blood sugar and insulin resistance versus a spleen person who is very prone to slow digestion, to not being able to tolerate sugar very well, to really changing, or instead a pericardium heart person who is transitioning into menopause with a lot of anxiety. Now, the advantage of knowing these different types is, again, helping everybody identify their starting point, right? Because if you are a liver person, then before anyone gives you any hormone or hormone replacement therapy, that liver cleanup, that liver balancing should happen. And in China, if we're going to use the Chinese medicine tools, that happens with acupuncture or herbal therapy or cupping or some of these things that they use. The advantage of a Western trained medical doctor knowing what type you are is that we create a whole journey, right? You're not running around to see what the acupuncturist says and then see what the Ayurvedic practitioner says and then go see what the nutritionist says. You're creating a journey from starting point to a toolbox that helps you walk all the way through. So let's go back to the liver person. We say they need liver cleanup. We talk about that. We talk about what that looks like. We put them on that plan. Then let's say they're still experiencing significant symptoms of menopause, but maybe not as much as when they walked into this conversation. Well, now begins a conversation around hormones and hormone replacement. And what does that need to look like? Now, a liver person shouldn't be on heavy-handed doses of hormones. It's not going to work. It's going to build up quickly. They're going to start to see the negatives of all of that and have all the side effects. And then they're going to probably come off of them because they're saying it doesn't work. And so when we apply this methodology to it, we're going to be like, you can have hormones, but your dose has to be very small and has to be in the context of you detoxifying and breaking the hormones down effectively. Okay, so that's the liver meridian person versus somebody who's got more of what I was saying, the pericardium or heart type of menopause, where they actually need a lot of support mentally. So they need a mental health plan paired with their hormone plan to help ground them and navigate this next season. So hopefully that all makes sense. But the point of it is that there's a lot of typing, there's a lot of bio-individuality that they spoke about in terms of meridians or doshas or energy or all these different things that, again, when I can apply the Western medicine technology to it, we can actually test and understand where to begin and where to end and where hormones are appropriate in the conversation around hormone replacement therapy.
Now, not all doctors are made alike.
No.
And, I can imagine some people listening going, oh my God, if I walked into my GP or doctor and told them about my doshas and my chakras,
Yeah.
they may not be listened to.
Right.
Do you have advice for women when they're looking for a doctor that may look at these different modalities? Do you have any advice for how to find somebody like you?
Definitely. Well, I mean, I see this as my mission, by the way, to train doctors, to bring them up to speed, to bring the medical conversation together. That's why I'm doing a lot of what we were talking about. We have a digital telehealth platform, Whole Plus, which we have a provider team that can do that. But I know and I recognize that that's still short-sighted, that we really need to expand it even more. So that's a part of my overall mission. But I will say, that folks trained in integrative health or functional health have a little bit more of this language under their belt, right? They do seem to see the world that way. Even some folks in the US that are trained naturopathically, I feel like they have some of this language. So I think as a patient, if you don't have access to somebody who thinks and talks this way, I think your first step is just to get super educated on your own, And my book, The Hormone Shift, was an attempt to help people with that education process where they can start to identify who they are. We have, a test and a quiz in there for them to begin that journey and be like, okay, this is where I am. Therefore, this might need to be my starting step. So that when you're going into these GPs that have done standard Western medical training that doesn't offer this, right? It's not a fault of anyone's. It's not offered, then we're not expecting them to jump hoops to arrive at this point. Instead, your conversation with them would be like, I'd like hormone replacement therapy. What will be the best form for me? How will we monitor this moving forward, right? And so you're able as a patient to put them in the right sort of positioning for this conversation around your health. If you can't find somebody who can kind of seamlessly do this for you and can kind of flex between these two worlds.
And I think I heard you speak on another show once, and you said sometimes the best doctor is the one that who will listen to you and partner
We'll
with you.
collaborate,
Yeah, will
right?
collaborate with
Yeah,
you on your journey and be
yeah.
open to it, right?
Totally. And yeah, I mean, I think we need to get away from this. I'm the doctor, I'm right. There's only one way to do things. I have 20 studies that tell me it's the right way to do things because those 20 studies still don't address you, the patient, and you, the person. And so I think, in the olden days, the doctors were tribal leaders, right? We were priestesses or priests, and we were a part of the community. We were integrated into a family because it's a journey. It's not just a stop, get your stuff and go. It was very much a journey. So I think you need somebody who's willing to embrace the journey with you,
And that takes time too. I know I feel for the medical community as well. I mean,
Yeah, me
doctors
too.
don't have, they're given 10 minutes or 15
Yeah,
minutes, tell me the one problem you have.
right.
So I feel for them as well. The system is a little bit broken. And needs a little
Very much.
bit of work. Now, one area that really gets discussed, that does not get discussed in Western medicine is emotions.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
you have dedicated a whole chapter to it
Yes.
because the East-West approach to balancing hormones takes into account the emotional body. Explain that to us.
Definitely. Look, everything is connected. Our emotional, energetic, physical, mental health, it's all interconnected. One molecule can drive a response in all those different layers of our being in our body and can really change what our experience is as we move forward through life. And so, one of the things I talk about over and over again is that when there is a hormone shift, and now the research is slowly catching up, but when there is a hormone shift, there is a change as well in your emotional vibration or in how you feel. We know it as simply as when progesterone drops, women get more anxious. When estrogen drops, women get more depressed. What we don't know, or what we're not talking about enough more specifically, is how to help and empower women to identify the connection between changes in their hormone levels and changes in their emotional responses and emotional presentation to themselves and to the world. Going back to the teenagers again, like we know those androgens that I was just talking about predispose them. Androgens, by the way, are like the high testosterone, DHT, things that cause acne and hair loss. Those androgens are predisposing them to chronic anxiety, to rage, and then in turn, 30% of women with PCOS have depression, severe depression. And so we know that there's a connection between what these hormones are doing and how they're communicating with the emotional body. So for women out there who are spinning emotionally, right, the first thing for them to do is really to identify and start to gauge how they feel on a regular basis and then match it to their hormone pattern, right? And match it to a timeline. I'm big about doing a timeline in your life. Like at this age, you felt like this. At this age, you're feeling like this. What are the changes? And then let's shrink that. Let's take it month to month and week to week and help to identify what those rhythms are. In the book, there's a chart on the levels of emotions, right? The lowest emotion being, the nastiest things we think about, like hate and anger and, the things that lead us on a more destructive path.
Very low
If you're
vibration.
landing there, what now?
Very low vibration.
Very low
Yeah.
vibration, right? And if you're landing in those and you're making decisions from that place, your life is going to play out in a much different way. So it's really important to understand where you're landing the majority of the time and work to bring yourself up into at least that neutral place, which is peace and acceptance and kind of a calm vibration. We don't need to be all like love, joy, and happiness all the time, but we should be neutral the majority of the time. And if you're not able to get yourself there, or there are too many fluctuations throughout a given month or day, then we need to understand what the chemistry is behind those fluctuations. I think that's really important.
So if
And
I'm
for
a
a lot of
woman right now listening to that and I'm recognizing myself in that, you're suggesting, just start tracking, start tracking your
totally,
moods.
how you feel. It's a very simple question. How are you feeling? And then there's a grid in there that grades the emotions. I think there's like a 10 point emotional scale. Use it and just put a dot on where you're landing,
Yeah.
day to day. And then maybe look back for a week and say like, okay, 6 days out of the week, I'm landing in a space of either worry or anger or hatred. Something's wrong. You shouldn't be there most of the time. We should be able to move you up, and we got to figure that out.
I actually made a note of it because on page 132, there's you make the point that hormonal shifts are rarely investigated as one of the root cause of emotional issues or mental health conditions. And the impact of trauma, loss, and emotional upheaval is rarely investigated beyond counseling or grief therapy.
Absolutely.
I mean, really
Absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah. And I'm passionate about that for the youngsters as much as I am about, women and men too. We can't leave men out of this conversation going through these transitions because literally they can have a perfect life, but the world goes dark, and they can really destroy their lives and blow things up very quickly. And I've seen this over and over again. I've had women sit with me and be like, I'm getting divorced. I'm done. And I'm like, okay, can we do this work first? And then you make that decision. And sure enough, time after time, people have landed back in that chair after a period of time, like, no, we were kind of able to work it out. And I just kind of slightly smile and I'm like, huh. Or it's the other, like someone's staying in a very toxic situation and they finally get the clarity to understand it's not the right place for them. And they're able to take that next step of like, okay, no, I need to move on. But whatever it is, you cannot see when your chemistry and your hormones are all over the place. So to have clarity when it comes to aligning, kind of your purpose and your mission with what you're supposed to do, we got to get all these different bodies balanced. And the physical body is a body that influences every other aspect of our health.
And is there, I mean, like, so if somebody came in and had one of those issues like you just described and you put them on a protocol to say, listen, don't make any major life decisions just yet.
Yeah.
Let's try to get this under control. I mean, how long would that take? Is that 12 weeks? Is that a year?
90 days is a good number, you know,
That's
90 days
manageable. 90 days is
manageable.
manageable.
3 weeks, we see significant shifts. The body shifts, I believe, and I might be oversimplifying it, but in my experience, sitting with people, I think you see 21-day shifts all the time. And every 3 weeks, there's some kind of shift.
We need
So my
another book
ninth,
with a 90-day marriage timeline.
there we go. I love it. 90 days, I'll fix your marriage.
Yeah,
No,
could that be a free download?
I know, exactly. And I think that 90 days is a good gauge of clearing, of balancing, especially when we're talking about hormones, because hormones don't fix themselves, in a day or two. So 90 days is a good gauge of where you're landing and are you feeling better, and then you make decisions. You never make decisions, going back to that chart in that book, don't make any decisions if you're landing in those lower level vibrations. Don't do that. Like, really work to get into those upper level vibrations first and emotions before you make big life decisions.
Yeah, girls, we want to raise our vibration. Okay, raise the vibration if we need
Yes,
to.
absolutely.
The other thing that's really interesting, I think, in East West is the gut hormone connection, and everybody's
Yes,
talking about the gut right now.
right.
But you describe the gut as the source of our hormone superpower.
Definitely. I mean, the gut is ground zero, and it's ground zero for your health. It's involved in packaging of those hormones. It's involved in sending those hormones off to where they need to go to. There's a whole microbiome involved in metabolizing estrogen. It's called the estrobolome, right? So if the gut is not working well, then hormones don't behave themselves, right? So one of the things we need to understand is that in this holistic toolbox, again, like, why hormone therapy is not enough. It's not enough because you have to look at the gut and the liver and some of these other things in terms of balance and managing hormones effectively. So let's go back to, if you're not getting enough fiber, then you're not going to have enough of a bacteria called ruminococcus, which is responsible for helping with estrogen transport and moving estrogen to the right places, right? When estrogen levels, for example, decline, we see a depletion in two bacteria. Prevotella is one and Akkermansia is the other one, which in turn impact our metabolic health. So a healthy diet serves you well. You talk about women going into perimenopause and menopause. Most of them know this and find this out accidentally, but we need that healthy diet, high in fiber, high in healthy fats, getting the protein we need, because it supports the hormones in terms of their messaging and packaging, and kind of like cheating with sugar and caffeine and alcohol and all these other things, no longer works for us anymore.
I swear that was part of my journey. I had really transformed my eating habits. I had transformed how I exercised. And it was part of the inspiration for me to create this show was when I looked back, I was like, what did I do that I've had an easier transition than some people? And I really believe in that whole diet,
Me
nutrition,
too.
and
Me
exercise part
too.
of it. And even just starting there before you jump
Yeah.
in to the hormone conversation, which is what I'm gonna do now, actually, because
Okay.
but what
Awesome.
I do love about the East-West method is that you provide so many suggestions of things you do before you dip your toe into hormones. So, what are the different talk us through the different layers or stages of testing or management of symptoms before you would get to hormone replacement?
Definitely. I mean, I think one of the first things I always do is clean up diet and really look at the gut. And we can have a very generic conversation around that, which is universally what's happening to all women as they approach these hormone transitions, is that they're seeing shifts in blood sugar and shifts in insulin stability. So they may first experience it with crashing blood sugars and then rising blood sugars, belly fat, weight gain, all these different things. So the first place to start is really cleaning up your diet, removing inflammatory foods, eating at consistent intervals, trying to get 20 to 30 grams of protein every 4 hours, and getting a minimum of 30 grams of fiber per day. To me, those are non-negotiable basics, a place where everyone can begin.
I hope
Now,
everybody has a pen right now.
right. Well, the advantage of typing now and understanding more specifically what your hormone type is, or your dosha, or your meridian, is that that very generic level of information can be personalized a little bit more. So people who have estrogen dominance need even more fiber. They need a lot of the cruciferous vegetables. People that are in a depletion state or low progesterone, low estrogen, they need more fat. Everyone needs more protein as the hormones go down to kind of buffer against these blood sugar fluctuations. So diet is always step one. Looking at gut health is step two. And you can do a lot of testing around the gut. Like, do you have candida? Do you have bacterial overgrowth? Are you lacking enzymes? These are things that we can use testing to get a little bit more specific about. I think looking at your body's ability to metabolize even your own hormone is really important. And that's, again, a place where testing steps in and makes sure that you don't have high androgens, you're not accumulating estrone, which is a metabolite of estrogen, that you're not building up progesterone metabolites, or your cortisol is not out of control. So that's helpful in terms of managing kind of how your body's metabolizing the hormones that you even do have. And then moving on from there, we look at nutrients, because there's a huge load that nutrients can do to manage your symptoms, right? If you're having sleep disorders, using things like magnesium and maybe some herbal remedies. If you're having hot flashes or night sweats, there's a whole toolbox for that. If you're having, issues with energy and brain fog, are your B vitamins where they need to be? Or is your folate where it needs to be? And then even anxiety and depression is very tied to different nutrient levels. So there's that level of work to do. And then from there, maybe moving into, what is the hormone imbalance and what are we really dealing with? And if we're truly dealing with low progesterone and it's not coming up with all the other strategies, first sometimes we'll begin herbally with something like Chaste Tree or Vitex, but then we'll move to a bioidentical progesterone. Or if we're dealing with low or depleting estrogen, using like a Dong Quai might be a first step, or you might need bioidentical estrogen. So these are things that we're deciding and managing, and then we'll dip into the pharmaceutical box if we need to, right? Sometimes androgen levels are so high that it's not responding to diet and herbs and supplements and stuff like that alone. So we have many patients that are on like an oral minoxidil or an oral spironolactone, which are androgen blockers, to help bring that down as well. So again, that's how it kind of all works together at the end of
What's
the
your
day.
view on there's a lot of discussion now about hormone replacement, not just for menopause, but for longevity.
Yeah.
And, so if people are asymptomatic during their menopause, is there an argument to go on hormones as we're all living into our 70s, 80s, 90s? Is there a benefit to being on it?
70s, 80s, 90s, here's the catch. Okay, I'm going to answer two ways. Yes, there's a benefit to being on hormones, but 70s, 80s, or 90s, your gut and your liver are slowing down. So the metabolizing and the ability of the body to break the hormone down is also going down. So if you put a big dose of hormone on a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old, then the risk you run is that their body can't break it down, and you're going to see the negatives of too much hormone, right? The negatives of too much hormone, remember, are going to be things like fibroids, ovarian cysts, a thickened endometrial lining, higher risk for, hormone-based cancers, that type of thing. But if you are going to monitor it in this holistic framework and check and do labs and stay on top of it, I would advocate for the 70 or 80-year-old being on hormones. The problem is people have to do the work. Otherwise, they do run the risk of doing more harm than good.
You have to stay on top of it, is what I'm
Yes,
hearing as well. Okay, did
totally.
you hear that, Mom? So, okay, so I have a million questions because you cover so many topics in your book. But what I thought I would do instead was I went on to at menopositive.life and looked at the types of questions that were coming up from our followers. And
Okay,
I thought,
awesome.
I mean, if you're up for it, I thought we would hit a couple of those questions
Yeah,
and you could give us some advice from the East-West approach on how you. All right,
absolutely.
amazing. Um, Mood. There's a lot. What's causing us to be so moody? What can we do about it? Are there foods that can help balance mood through menopause? Go.
Yes, hormones do cause your mood. What's causing your mood is either a drop in progesterone, a drop in estrogen, or too much estrogen if you're younger. That can do it too. Food can influence your mood. The number one thing to influence your mood is get your blood sugar levels stable so it can handle the fluctuations of your hormones. So increase your protein, increase your fiber, no crazy fasting and all that stuff. Eat at regular intervals. And then from there, if you're still having mood issues, that's when you start to dive into which is the hormone impacting you the most and what do you need to do about it.
Amazing. Okay, energy. How can I increase my energy levels? Why have they dropped
The
anyway? But
low estrogen leads to low energy. Low progesterone leads to low energy. Low testosterone leads to low energy, and so does the thyroid that's off as well. Number one thing here, let's add in some B vitamins. Add in a methylated B vitamin. Women have a super high dose of, a high need of B vitamins as they're going through these transitions. I think the second, add some magnesium at night as well. The rules around protein continue too to help you build energy. Again, if you're struggling, herbal might be next, doing something like an ashwagandha and even something like a rhodiola to herbally help you build energy. But from there, you may want to think about HRT.
Migraines. People suffering from migraines?
Ooh, I love this one. Okay, so migraines are, if they're at ovulation, if you're still getting cycles and you're getting migraines right around day 14 or so, that's an estrogen spike. You actually need to be on some estrogen like detoxers, days 1 through 10 or 1 through 12 of your cycle. DIM is one, calcium glucarate is another one. If instead you're getting a migraine all throughout the month and it's new and your cycles are more scanty, you could be dropping hormones that are giving you migraines. Use Vitex, which is an herb that helps with progesterone boosting, may be helpful in that scenario. Dong Quai might be helpful, or sometimes you need a little bit of progesterone and estrogen as well.
Amazing. Okay. Cost. I've had some questions, that
Mm,
menopause is becoming a rich person's game.
mm,
But it doesn't have to be expensive or
no,
complicated, does it?
not at all. So, and I get that all the time too, and here's what I say back. It depends on where you're struggling with the cost. If you're talking about the cost of testing does not need to be expensive. I'm not sure what the UK situation is. Well, I do know you guys have LabCorp. We have standard LabCorp orders that you can do that usually run through your insurance and tell us exactly what your body's doing with hormones. Then when it comes to the solution-based part, compounding sometimes is a little bit pricier, right? But you don't have to do compounding. You can be creative with conventional preparations. And this is where, microdosing some of what's conventionally out there, prescribing it in a little bit of a different way if you have less hormone tolerance and can't tolerate the standard doses, those are things that happen next.
But there's also, I think, what I would like people to know as well is that there's a long-term cost if you don't deal
Such a good point. Yeah,
with these
that's a
things.
great point.
If you don't make
Yeah.
lifestyle changes, then there could be a longer term cost and there may be more medications and more
Right.
whatever later on in life. This one is for my mom.
Okay, got
This
it.
one's for my mom and all of her friends. So, if you're a woman in her 70s or in her 80s, does all of this advice still apply? Or is it too late?
Yes. No, it's never too late. Gut health, liver health, blood sugar management, muscle health, and then the role of hormones as a follow up, right, is still the sequence to go in, whether you're in your 70s, 80s, or beyond.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think hormones are so fluid. And, even for me, I'm noticing that my symptoms change over time. Um, you know, like right now, I'm getting more joint pain. So I've done a lot of the lifestyle changes. I've done the exercise and the supplements. And I mean, I haven't dipped my toe in the Chinese or I have done the Ayurvedic. Um, but when do you know? Well, I guess this is when I know it might be time to try hormones.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have, again, I think if you have walked through some of these changes already, then you might need hormones. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then the other point, too, to make is that the beauty of doing all this work before you get to hormones, you don't need as much hormone. You can get away with less hormone. And I think that's good, too.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I did go into a doctor because I said, so I grew up, my mother's generation was the Women's Health Initiative generation.
Yes.
So I've
Yes.
grown up with that fear of, and I'm listening and learning so much now on the things you can do or how it's changed, that I'm now more interested in that microdosing. Um, Dr. Taz, before we let you go, we ask every guest this final question. Okay. Knowing what we know now about the benefits of a holistic approach to managing hormones and the menopause transition, what would you tell our 35-year-old listener?
I would tell our 35-year-olds to really invest some time and energy into their gut health and get a good understanding of what's happening there. That's going to serve them well as they hit the next set of transitions coming up ahead. I would also tell them, to really track their mental health because I think that if we can get a sense of what you're like when you feel good, then when we start to reflectively look back later, it's easier to kind of look at those benchmarks and know where we need to be.
What would you tell our 45-year-old listener?
I think our 45-year-olds really start to get upset and panic about changes in their weight. That's probably a universal that I hear. It's probably where you start to see that belly fat. It's probably the first time where you're like, what just happened? Everything I did before wasn't working. I think I want to remind them that this is universal and normal, but what is happening is changes in blood sugar levels and increasing insulin resistance. So it is a time to dive in and really change the way you eat, the way you live, some of the habits that you took for granted, and really think about balancing blood sugar, sleeping more consistently, because that now really matters in the game around hormones.
And finally, our 55-year-old listener.
So our 55-year-old may have already gone through menopause or may be about to be there. And I think for them, the importance of muscle health, the importance of maintaining good skin and hair health through protein intake, muscle training, all of these things becomes incredibly important. And if they are experiencing changes in any of these arenas and they're trying on their own, right? Maybe they're doing the supplements and they're weightlifting and doing all the things, but they're still experiencing significant changes in their hair, their skin, they're losing muscle, or even cognitively and emotionally they're struggling. Don't be afraid of hormones. It's time.
Dr. Taz, thank you so much for joining the MenoPositive community and for making my dream come true.
Thank you. I'm so honored. Thank you so much for having me.
And for everyone listening, hormone management is in your control. Being open to various treatments only expands our toolbox. You can take it or leave it, but maybe just try it. Sometimes a small tweak can make a big difference. My hope is that everyone looks at these things earlier, because if you could prepare your body, this could be the best time of your life. Now, Dr. Taz, it's a shame that you are remote because I bake for all of my guests.
Oh, amazing. What is that sitting there?
So this is a chocolate banana avocado bread. So it's like banana bread, but it's got avocado in it. And there's no
Yum.
refined sugar, no gluten,
Yum.
no dairy. And I know you have your wonderful recipes. I'll send you my recipe. Maybe you can tell me what
Send
you
me
think.
your recipe. I was going to say, send me your recipe. I want to try. We have a snow day today. Maybe I can make it today. So anyhow.
I'll email it to Lindsay for you. Oh, and by the way, I knew you were MenoPositive when you downloaded this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love bringing this information to you, and I love that you're taking control of your health. You can follow MenoPositive on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. Join me next week as we discover more ways to optimize our bodies. Because together, we're going to redefine menopause.
I got a good feeling.